Hello and what is up YouTube? G3 Iron here, and today we are going to take a look at playing summoners in Path of Exile. Right above me, of course, is the resource list from the official Path of Exile forums, where there are tons of different build guides for you to take a look at and check out if you are in any way interested in playing a summoner in Path of Exile. We're going to take a look at a couple of different builds later on in the video, some of the different builds that have got some of the qualities that you're going to want to look at. I haven't reviewed every single summoner guide that's out there, but I did take a look at a few and can give you a few recommendations for those of you whose curiosity is piqued by the following discussion on playing summoners in Path of Exile. So without further ado, let's dive right in. What is a summoner in Path of Exile? Well, first off, a simple definition. A summoner in POE is a character archetype that primarily relies on summoning minions to either provide offensive firepower, defensive utility, or some sort of hybrid mixture of both. That's what a summoner is. You can think of this in pop culture. A lot of the time we think of necromancers, or we think of summoners of the undead. We think of disturbers of cemeteries and graveyards as being necromantic in their power. Those who study the dark arts, those who don't necessarily accept death as being the end of life, but rather a transition into something new. These are the sorts of flavorful icons that come to mind and that inspire players as they are interacting with various types of content. Not every summoner in PoE is going to be focused on the undead, and so PoE offers a wide variety, actually, of different types of summoners. It doesn't simply mean that you're summoning back things that once were dead. It can mean summoning an army of golems. It can mean summoning an army of angry spirits. It can mean using the weapons of your enemies against them. It can mean all sorts of things. But this is overall what a summoner is. It's somebody that relies on minions to do a lot of the heavy lifting for the character. So moving on, a few examples of summoned minion skills are in Path of Exile that are active. So these are active skills that you constantly need to be using and refreshing. These are more active play styles, quote unquote active. Summon Raging Spirits. While you could argue it's not necessarily an active play style to sit in a corner and just spam away your Raging Spirits, gameplay for Summon Raging Spirits has changed quite a bit over the years in Path of Exile. It used to be that we could have a lot more Raging Spirits than what we do have now, and they would simply flood the screen and go and attack home in on their enemies, which was really, really cool. Now we've got a little bit more powerful Raging Spirits. Like each Raging Spirit that you summon is a little bit more individually powerful, but we've got less total overall Raging Spirits that you can summon. So there's a trade-off there that has been made throughout the development of Summon Raging Spirits. But it's a little bit more active playstyle now. Animated Weapon is another very active style of playing summoner. In fact, we're going to take a look at a guide that uses Animate Weapon and takes advantage of that, and actually actively uses a bow weapon and actively attacks itself. Typically when you think of a summoner or a necromancer in many games, they're not necessarily actively casting things themselves or actively participating in the combat, but they're more oriented on providing buffs to their summons or debuffs to the things that their summons are attacking. But Animated Weapon is a great example of a very, very active skill. A couple of examples of passive summoned minions. So what I mean by passive here is not that the minions are actually passive, but the character, the player, can be a little bit more passive. And the reason why the character can be a little bit more passive is precisely because the minions are a little bit more active. So examples of this are Animated Guardian, Summon Zombie, which is an awesome archetype and an awesome playstyle in PoE. I've played several different iterations of necromancers that use zombies, including a couple of builds that have taken advantage of strength stacking. Those are really fun. Summon Spectre. Spectre is a great skill. Summon Spectre allows you to interact with all of the different creatures and really enemies that you interact with in Path of Exile. As long as it drops a corpse, then it can be a Spectre that you can resurrect and then use against the enemy. It's really, really fun and really, really interesting. Every time there's an update, every time there's a new minion that comes out for us to kill and for us to fight in the world of Wraeclast, a lot of people who enjoy playing summoners will dive into researching how useful that particular monster or minion might be if you use them as a raised Spectre. Another more passive summon playstyle is using golems. So Golemancers were quite a popular thing a couple of leagues ago, and they're very, very interesting. It's really, really fun and funny, and you can just straight up play like Benny Hill music over top of some of the Golemancers videos where you just see like 5 little flame golems running around and blowing up Shaper. It can be really, really funny to watch Golemancers do its work. Herald of Agony is a newer one as of the last year in Path of Exile's development, where you essentially have to actively be stacking virulence stacks in order to keep your crawler around. And it's a really, really interesting playstyle that has allowed for summoning to branch out a little bit more from being underneath either the Scion or underneath an Ascended Witch into the Necromancer tree. Herald of Agony is given for a few more options for players to play, and so it's allowed for a little bit more active play type, but it's also kind of passive, because once you've got those stacks up, yes, if you're continuing to keep those stacks going, you can do that, but it's almost like Summon Raging Spirits. I don't know, I kind of debated which of the two sections to throw it in, and ultimately I settled on the passive side. But anyway, feel free to disagree down below. Herald of Agony, really cool summoned minion skill. And then next off, Herald of Purity. The minions that get summoned with Herald of Purity can be interesting. I've seen a couple of different people theorycraft some very, very interesting Herald of Purity builds. I haven't tried it out personally just to focus on the minions, but it looks like it's quite a fun skill in terms of scaling the minions up and seeing what they can do. But it's mostly used as a quality of life augmenting skill, not necessarily a primary skill. So these are just some examples, and there are, of course, more. This isn't exhaustive, but these are just some of the examples of the different sorts of skills that are available to you when you're playing Path of Exile, whether you want to be a little bit more active in your playstyle or a little bit more passive. So why would you play a summoner in Path of Exile? Maybe what are your motivations, or what are some reasons to play? Well, the first off, it's fun, okay? It's fun. And if it's not fun, right, don't be a grumpy, grouchy gamer. Like, go have fun. If you don't think summoners and playing summoners are fun, that's great. I'm glad for you that you've got other ways that you enjoy playing Path of Exile, but just don't play it. Don't play a summoner if you don't think it's fun. If you do think it's fun, then chances are you're probably more lined up with our gamer motivations, a little bit more with me. I played summoners almost exclusively for the first 2.5 years that I played Path of Exile. It took me, I want to say it was 18 to 19 to maybe 20 months before I even touched another character type other than a witch, simply using zombies, specters, and skeletons. That's pretty much all I used when I first started playing Path of Exile. I think I maybe made a couple of other characters and were just like, yeah, I would much rather play a summoner. And this is actually one of the things that drew me over from playing Torchlight as well as Diablo, because those games, while you can play a summoner, the unique thing about playing a summoner in Path of Exile is you can truly test the limits of how many different summon things you can have on the screen. A lot of other games, when you play a Necromancer, when you play a summoner, it's like, all right, I've got my one dude over there, my one really big minion, or my one really big troll that's under my control, or, you know, my one really awesome, or my couple really awesome animals or something that I've summoned to fight alongside me. But in Path of Exile, it's like, if you want to have an army and be a Dark Lord Necromancer of bringing things back to life and never letting your opponents control the number of combatants on the field, then playing a summoner in Path of Exile is for you. It can be amazing, which, of course, commanding a horde of undead is a really awesome motivating factor for a lot of us. Whether you've played other RPGs where maybe you've tried to play a Necromancer, or maybe you've played or simply read other fantasy books where you've been interacting with the whole concept of undead warlords or darkness commanding and breaking the rules in the cycle of life and death. Like, if you enjoy commanding a horde of undead, or just a horde period, then playing a summoner in PoE is going to be for you. Maybe you never want your character to be alone. So this is a meme that comes up almost every time I mention that you can interact with other people in Path of Exile. Somebody inevitably drops a comment and says, "Friends? Path of Exile? What? Other people? Path of Exile? Play with other people? What is this?" So memes aside, maybe you're role-playing your character, and you never want your character to be alone in the world of Reclass, because it is a harsh and dangerous place. And so your character maybe is going to rely on some of their magical abilities, some of their researched abilities to be able to interact with summoning things in order to keep themselves safe, because they can't necessarily trust in their own strength of arms or in their own prowess with weaponry or skill in combat. Maybe you just never want your character to be alone, and you want your character to be protected by a horde of helping hands. Maybe you want a safe play style. So summoners are very hardcore friendly. This is one of the reasons why I played summoners so often in my early days in Path of Exile, because I almost always played hardcore with a couple of friends that played Path of Exile and got me into the game. It's very, very hardcore friendly. And for those of you that want to disagree on this, feel free to drop a comment below. I'm happy to have a disagreement on this. One of the reasons why I think summoners are so hardcore friendly for the last several years was because of the way how block worked. And so playing max block necromancers was very, very strong. On top of that, right, if you just want to say, well, Iron, that's really saying that block is really, really strong. Why is it particularly that a summoner would be hardcore, viable or hardcore friendly? One of the things that's great about a summoner is you have visual cues when things aren't going well. Oftentimes. So if you notice, let's say that you're using summon zombies as a primary defensive skill because they're a great meat shield for your character. If you notice that something takes down one of your zombies, you can simply go, whoa, let's be careful around that thing. So it gives you instant feedback for you to know how to play and how defensively to play. Also, because of the way that summoning skills work, and because of the way that oftentimes summoning UI works, and summoning UI can be very, very buggy. Don't let anybody tell you that it's not. It can be very, very buggy, and that can be one of the frustrating things about playing a summoner. Nonetheless, one of the great things about it is that because you've always got these summoned things that are doing damage for you or that are protecting you and providing defensive layers, you can really focus on learning different boss fights, on learning different encounter zones, and on keeping your character alive. You can focus on your HP pool, your mana pool, your resources, your flask management. You can focus on all of those things because your minions are taking care of all of the other minutia that's going on the screen. So it's a rather safe playstyle in general. There are non-safe ways to play a summoner, but in general, it is a safe playstyle. Maybe you're on a budget. So playing a summoner in Path of Exile can be incredibly budget friendly when you're starting a league, because so much of playing a summoner in general, again, we're talking about tons of different builds. You can look above. There are tons of different builds to play summoners. Nonetheless, if you're on a budget and you're starting out a league, or maybe you're starting in a fresh league, or maybe you swapped from softcore to hardcore, from hardcore to softcore, maybe you're starting out in a solo self-found run. If you're on a budget in any sort of way, a lot of the damage and survivability from playing a summoner comes from gem levels and comes from areas in your build that aren't necessarily tied to a specific unique or tied to a specific combination of items, which makes it great to start out. A lot of the builds that we're going to be taking a look at here in just a moment are going to be builds that you can start out with, and will actually show you what unique items you need to be looking for and acquiring as you scale your character. And many of these builds, the best ones that you can possibly look for, are actually going to tell you, hey, this is a prioritization list of things that you ought to be going for, and this is actually a way that you can play this build on a budget. My very first kill with on Shaper was with a Necromancer, and was with a summoner build style, and I actually swapped out some of my most expensive gear and swapped into some really inexpensive defensive gear, and that's actually what allowed me to take down Shaper. I took off a bunch of stuff that was going to help me do damage and help give damage to my minions, but I was learning the fight. It was some of the first times that I was encountering Shaper, and so I switched to a much more defensive setup, and boom, all of a sudden I went from, hey, why is it that I'm instantly dying? Why is it that I'm using up all of my portals? To, oh, I can totally take this guy down. I need to play more defensively and focus a little bit more on me staying alive. My minions are going to take everything else out. And I did that on a relatively cheap budget. I took out a lot of the things that were more expensive in that build, and I was actually able to progress a lot further in the content that I was aiming to take down. Maybe you take pleasure in filling up the screen with your numberless armies. So Animate Weapon is the perfect remedy for this. If you want the entire screen to be flooded with your stuff, if you want to open the gates, as it were, to just chucking all sorts of weapons at your opponent, this will this play style will unlock that style of gameplay to you. Playing Animate weapon, as well as even combining different types of summons that you can do, since there are specific limits to certain skills and the number of certain things that you can summon. You can simply mash a whole bunch of them together. So there's a bunch of different hybrid builds out there that just mash a bunch of different combinations of skeletons, of zombies, of specters, of summon raging spirits, of animate weapons, of guardians, of golems, and you simply walk into a zone, start filling up the area with your army, and then away you go, followed by your numberless horde, which is awesome. So, a couple of build guide recommendations. You might be wondering, all right, Iron, you sold me. I'm going to play a summoner, or I'm interested in playing a summoner. What should I be looking for in a summoner build guide? I've got a separate video on this that I refresh every league because it's always a topic that people want to know. What are kind of general guidelines for looking and sorting through and evaluating if a build guide is a good build guide to follow or not. So here are my six quick principles on how to look for a build guide. First off, is the build explained well? What I mean by this is, do they explain whether or not the build is hardcore or softcore viable? Do they explain if the build is aimed at bossing or at speed clearing? Is there a prioritization of gear acquisition? Are there specific items that are simply going to make or break the build, meaning you could or you could not play it in solo self-found or in trade league? Is it particularly dependent on any particular node? Maybe a build really takes off after you get 70 passive points, or maybe 90 passive points. Those are all things that, depending on how well the build guide explains itself, can be a make or break factor, because otherwise you may get through your gameplay and you may be leveling up and you may go, man, this character feels terrible. Well, that's because in 3 levels, that's really when you hit your power spike. Or maybe once you get your 2nd or 3rd ascendancy, that's really when the gameplay starts to tune on. I see a lot of new players come in, whether that's into our guild, whether that's onto G3, whether that's people that are messaging me asking for feedback. And a lot of people look at their build and they go, my build doesn't feel like this build guide. What's going on? What's the difference? And a lot of the time it's because the build guide, it's not actually because of the player, it's because the build guide isn't explained well. So that's the first and the priority. Is the build guide explained well? Secondly, who made the build? So things that you want to look for here, it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to be following somebody on YouTube or on Twitch, or that you need to know somebody from social media or from your guild in order to say, yes, this is definitely a good build. But it is very, very helpful to simply look at how long a player has been playing Path of Exile. A lot of the time these builds will show you, and especially if you're using the official forum guide, it will show you the original posting date of the build. So a lot of these builds might be builds from a very, very long time ago, but they've been updated and curated by their original authors to actually be updated and changed with each coming patch and with each new league, and with all of the different changes on the passive tree to items, etc., all the balance changes that come out, and even new items that are introduced. So depending on who made the build and how long they've been playing Path of Exile tells you a lot about the quality of the build. If somebody, for instance, builds a build and throws it up on the forums, and they've got maybe 1 or 2 challenges completed and they've only been playing Path of Exile for a month, it could be that that's a great build, but it could also be that they're unfamiliar with the game's mechanics, and so it might be a little bit more sketchy. If they've got a lot of challenges completed, that tells you not just that they've played the game for a long sequence of time, but it also says that they're currently playing in the league that you're in. And that's very, very valuable, because it tells you that the build, if it's updated properly, that the build is up to date, and you can trust that the information that's included in it will still be applicable to the build and to the league that you are currently involved in. So you want to ask who made the build. Thirdly, does the build have gameplay video? So we live in the age of the internet where almost everybody wants to be able to see something, to try something out before they essentially buy it. Try it before you buy it, as it were. So is there a link to a Twitch stream? Is there a link to a YouTube? Is it embedded into like a guild site or into a guild Discord? Like, does the build have gameplay video? Yes or no? Unfortunately, a lot of the time for me, if I'm looking at a build and it doesn't have video showing what the person claims it does, like if you say your build can take down Uber Elder and you don't have a video of it attached to the build, I'm sorry, why is it that I should believe that your build can take down Uber Elder? It might be that it can, and it might be that in theory it can. It might have a great passive tree, it might have a great path of building, you might have great explanations, you might have played the game for a long time. But the reality is, if you can't show me what you're claiming your build does, oftentimes I'm going to pass by your build and choose another build to follow. And then also, is it featured elsewhere by other sources? So a lot of the times, different streamers, different YouTubers, different forum creators will not just reference their own stuff, but they'll also recognize, hey, this other person has done this really cool thing, and that's inspired me to have another take on it. So in this regard, citation as well as referencing other people and what they've done, and citation of previous builds or previous inspirations for the build can be really, really helpful. A lot of the times builds, when I'm looking at a personal build to play, I will go and take a look. If a build has been referenced to somebody else's build, I'll go take a look at the other person's build, and that gives you a template for comparison where you can say, I want to play a summoner, and maybe I want to try out a skeleton summoner, but I see this person has posted let's say a mage skeleton focused summoner, and this other person's got melee skeleton summoner. And this other third person has got all physical damage skeleton summoner. Well, what are the difference between those three? Oh, look, they all reference one another because they're all building off of similar contexts, but they're each a little bit different. So allowing yourself to actually go and do the research for comparison is really, really helpful to be able to know what a build feels like and what a build looks like, and how does the build compare to other sorts of builds that are out there. Fourthly, you want to ask, can the build be a league starter? So how pricey is the build? Does the build require specific uniques, specific jewels? I once made the mistake of building a summoner that was around very, very high-priced unique jewels at the time. And so I got it leveled up, and then I was like, all right, let's transition this guy from a leveling thing into its end game version. And I looked at the prices for the jewels that I needed, and I was like, this is way outside my budget. I just leveled this up for nothing. All right, I better go look for another build that I can use this character for, right? So always make sure that you know exactly how pricey the build is in its final iteration, as well as how pricey it is to get started and off the ground. Is it the sort of build that can grow with investment, or is it the sort of build that's got a high level of investment that's required from the get-go? Fifthly, you want to ask, does the build have a leveling guide? So frequently asked questions are, hey, what's the bandit choice of the build? Does that matter? And what are the best skills to use to level? A lot of the time, characters that are summoners won't necessarily use their skills to level. Now, I oftentimes will level with my own skill because a lot of different summoning skills are available very, very early, and you can simply play with it. It's not necessarily the fastest leveling process, but it can be fun. A lot of the times it can be very, very fun to level with and experience the story with the same skills and with similar setups to what you're going to do when you're mapping or playing towards the end of the game. So it can be very, very helpful to know, is there a different setup that's going to get me through the storyline faster, if that's your priority to get to your end game version of yourself? Or is the build allowable that you can simply level up with the gems that you're also going to be using in the end game? It's very, very helpful if a build's got those things. Then lastly, if the build guide has got a template for your goal. So if you want to reach certain end game content, whether that's a delve depth, a shaper completion, an uber elder kill, or if you want to farm specific locations, like, hey, is this a good mapping summoner? There are some summoners that are more fast than others. What a shock. Some builds are faster than others. So if you want to farm specific maps, specific league content, if you're looking to do Alva temples or delves, knowing exactly what your goals are for the build is very, very helpful and allows you to evaluate whether or not the build guide is the right one for you. So that being said, let's jump into a couple of different build guides. I think I've got 5 that I've pulled up here that we're going to take a look at. So first off, there's Ivanius' 6-link Spectre. It's the Solar Guards edition. It's a great example of showing progression, gear choices, and how to start a league. By the way, all of these recommended build guides that I've got will be posted down below in the video description. So if you simply want to click there in order to go take a look at these builds yourselves, you can do that very easily. So here's Ivanius's, his 6-link Solar Guard Spectre. One of the things that's really nice about his particular explanation is exactly how he divides up all of the content. So he shows off simply, here's all of his gear. And then here's how to start the build while you're playing very early on. Here's how to, whoops, here we go, buy a tabula, buy the Bones of Allure, and then get the +1 Spectre node. Like, he's giving you a systematic progression. Do this first, then do this, then do this. Very, very helpful. Then, when he says, hey, here's the Solar Guards, you need to have this. He's letting you know, if you don't have a Vis Mortis, your build is going to feel bad. Like, this is what you need to do for your best setup. So he's communicating ahead of time, hey, how much budget do you need? What sort of items are you looking for? It's all shown here. Leveling passive tree. He shows you, hey, level with dual wield Sunder. So he says this is a faster way to level than actually leveling with your Specters. It's really, really helpful, and it's explained quite well. It's made quite clear. You're not going to be using Specters as you're leveling up. You're going to probably be leveling using Sunder. Then he also says for bandits, you kill them all, and here's the Pantheon explanation that's going to help you out. So I really like this build just because it's quick, it's easy, and it's also explained pretty well for what it's going for. The next build that's up is Natt's Burning Specters. It's a great example of organized presentation. It includes videos, gear, and updates, as well as what updates have hurt the build. So take a look at this. As soon as you click on Natt's build guide, it says 3.x discontinued for now. Discontinued. In other words, Natt is no longer updating this. All right. He says in 3.0, the build was birthed. 3.1, Wickermen were nerfed. 3.2, block nerfed. 3.3, Diadis nerfed. And then in 3.4, his last update, he says, this patch spell block has been nerfed while minions have been buffed. I now fear classic summoners are beginning to fall behind defensively compared to the rest of the meta. I might be wrong, though. I will update the guide if VG, in other words Vanguards, turn out to be really nice for Delves. It will not be my starter build, though. Probably going to build around Herald of Agony or Slayer plus Scion. Enjoy Delve. I know I will, and die horribly. So he gives an introduction onto why it is that he's playing the Spectre that he is playing, either Tukohama's Vanguard or Solar Guards, an explanation on Wickerman, and then he includes some videos. He shows you here, hey, killing the Red Elder, killing Tier 15 Elder, killing the Red Elder Guardians, killing Shaper in, by the way, hardcore. Notable submitted videos. Here's a Chayula's Domain run, Phoenix, Minotaur, Chimera. Then he gives a build overview, right? You see how well organized this is? It's just a gloriously well-written, not necessarily succinct. It goes in depth. It's going to take you some time to go through all of this, but a wonderfully well-written, and for the time while it was updated, wonderfully updated build guide. That's Natt's Burning Specters. Thirdly is NouwayH's Auramancer for Animate Guardian. It features a league start guide, in-guide gifts, gives gear explanation, and displays various objectives completed, including Shaper, Uber Elder, and various delve depths. So let's take a look at NouwayH's particular build. This is a Null's Inclination Aurabot Summoner is what he's calling it. So here's a couple of his images. Here's him fighting Big Boy Elder. Here's him in a couple of maps. You can see all of the weapons that are simply flying around the screen, even as he is using an active skill himself, attacking with his own bow. He's got videos that include the Uber Elder, the Constrictor, the Red Elder. He's got some challenges for Shaper as well as Vol Temple. And he shows you some of the pros and cons to this build. He says, hey, you don't need a 6-link for this particular build. So if you're going SSF, that's an option. It's cheap to get started. There's plenty of space for customization on items in the passive tree. So if you're learning about the game and you go, hey, why is it that he went this way on the passive tree and not going this way? Guess what? You probably have got the extra points to do that if you want to. And it can run any map mod. So early on in a league, if you roll something that says reflect, or if you roll something that says no regen, or if you roll something otherwise that may be harmful to another build, you can simply look at it and go, yeah, I'll buy that build. I'll buy that map because my build can run it. There is some cons to playing Summoner. As we've mentioned, it can get really laggy at maximum minions. So if you're playing on a potato, you might have to just realize that. It produces a lot of visual sound and clutter, visual and sound clutter, which might hide important gameplay cues like Volatile Flame, Volatile Dead, Volatile Flame Blood, Caustic Ground, Reflected Missiles, etc. And it requires an alternate 6-link setup to do bosses. So again, there's pros and there's cons, but he's telling you that. He's telling you that up front. He's not making you experience that. So I really, really appreciated that for this particular build, NouwayH actually went through and showed you exactly what were some of the benefits and some of the cons of the build. Here's Hercanic's 74 minion Speaker of the Dead build. This is by far my favorite build guide. I haven't followed it, right? So disclaimer up front, haven't followed it. This is just my favorite build guide for flavor that I've ever seen in Path of Exile. So here's Speaker for the Dead, updated for patch 3.5. Speaker for the Dead, 74 minion summoner, league starter, leveling, 4.7 Shaper, million DPS. This is awesome. Hail O wandering soul, since the time of the ancient people of Bata, I have been a purveyor of the perverse art of necromancy. Shall I sate that dark curiosity of yours? You want power, do you not? You must have an army squirming with the wretched and the damned. You will wash the Atlas in your color, fell the most arrogant of abominations, and penetrate the deepest black pits of nightmare. I will show you how, for but a pittance, a mere piece of your soul. You won't miss it. Now, don't tarry. What's there to think about? You want it? I have it. Take it. And look at this. You click show like I accept, and the pack is now sealed. Look at this. This is just some awesome art. Art there is by CD Projekt. This is awesome with this awesome poem here, this awesome visual art by Luo Huan. We have but one mission: to twist the rules of mortal skill socketing and leverage multiple 5 and 6 link horrors to our retinue. 7 kind kill their kin for your glory. Up to 74 march in your name. Like, if you're looking for a thematic, well-written build guide, it don't get better than that. Like, it just doesn't. That's amazing. Anyway, I want to go play a Necromancer now. Like, I don't even care what the rest of the build guide. Anyway, I don't care what the rest of the build guide says. So he's got a passive tree on here. He's got a POB paste bin. He shows off all of his items. He shows you what things to avoid, what things to do. And then, of course, he's got more info. He's got videos. This is by far my favorite guide that's ever been written on POE. Okay, lastly, Shareware's Dead Reckoning Skeleton Mage Necro. It provides good options for adjusting the build and shows POB support links for either pure skeletons or skeleton specters hybrid. Okay, so we've talked a lot about how you can tweak things and how there are just so many different options when you're playing a summoner. And one of the things that I loved about this particular build is that it shows you and very clearly communicates, hey, depending on how you're playing the game, you might want to switch. So he says, I leveled as a summoner right from the beginning, starting with SRS, Summon Raging Spirit. He then tells you what links he used. It worked really well. I switched to skeletons in the early 30 levels using Reverberation Wand. So he's telling you what unique he used to level with. He still uses Summon Skeletons, Pierce plus LMP. If you don't like that or you prefer to stay SRS for longer, just switch the Life Spring with a Reverberation Rod and you should be fine until you get a 5-link. Optional. While leveling, I also tried a 5-link Sire of the Shards, which was quite fun and can recommend trying it at least once if you get your hands on a cheap one. All right, this is great. He shows you the passives and the passive skill tree, what to get, when to get them. I mean, he just shows you, here's the priority list. Hey, green stuff, then red stuff, then yellow. I mean, this is a gloriously well-written build guide that shows you lots of different options. And then down here at the bottom, he simply has 2 different POBs. So if you want to play pure skeleton build, here you go. Here's the POB for it. If you want to play hybrid with skeletons and zombies, here's the POB for it. So I really enjoyed that Shareware included these hybrid options in his build guide. So hopefully some of these build guides inspire you and interest you to play maybe a summoner the next league. So what summoner do you want to try? Let us know down below in the comments. Have you ever played a summoner? And if so, what kind of summoner did you play? What appeals to you about the summoner archetype, and what summoner do you want to go try? I will quickly answer each of these. So what summoner do I want to go try? I really want to go try a Herald of Agony summoner. That's one that I haven't played yet, and so I'm excited to go give that a shot. Have you ever played a summoner? If so, what kind? Yes, I have played Specters, I've played Zombies, I have played a mixture of Skeletons and Specters and Zombies. I've played SRS. I have not played the Soul Rest yet, so that's something that doesn't look all that great. It kind of, to me, it reminds me of what SRS used to be, so I feel like I've already played it, but I haven't. I have not played that. So those of you that have played Soul Rest stuff, let me know if it's different from SRS, because then maybe I'll go and give it a shot, but that's at least what it looked like to me. So I've played a lot of different versions of Necromancer, and I've loved all of them. I especially love Zombies and their animation and how they are so derpy and how they are such huge, massive meat shields. It's very, very helpful, and I've got a lot of affinity for them because they've kept me alive for a lot of hours playing in hardcore. What appeals to me about the Summoner archetype, I play a lot of various fantasy RPG games. For several years I tried to play almost every D&D setting I played in. I tried to play Necromancers. For those who have been around in G3 for a very, very long time, they can tell you about all of the different stories that I've DM'd. Almost every single homebrew that I brew includes a Necromancer of some kind, because why not? I just enjoy that sort of theme and that sort of style. Now that I'm getting more into Magic the Gathering, I really enjoy the concept behind the color black and its practicality, and it observes death as something to be used, as a tool to be taken advantage of. So I really enjoy that. I enjoy all of those sorts of things. So you could say definitely the theme of Summoner appeals to me, but also just filling the screen with my stuff and not the game stuff. Like when I enter into a zone and I've just got way more baddies than however many packs of baddies there actually are, that's really appealing to me. It's like, oh, you think I'm entering a dangerous area? No. You have entered into my dangerous area. That's really cool, and that appeals to me. And then lastly, I've already answered what summoner do I want to go try. I want to go try a Herald of Agony virulence stacking build. I'm not sure yet how I'm going to do it or which ascendancy I'm going to choose. Anyway, let us know. Those are my answers. Let us know down in the comments. And as always, thanks so much for watching. Feel free to subscribe for more videos. And I hope that today is a day that a Mirror of Calandra drops for you and you are able to go and build whatever kind of summoner it is that your heart so desires.